Hey, what's up everybody? So if you're new to my channel, then you wouldn't know that my channel is all about making homemade skincare products. So if you make homemade skincare products, you came to the right place. So I recently started a new series and it's catered towards beginners. So if you're a beginner, then again, you came to the right place. This series is titled Formulating Cosmetics for Beginners. And today we're specifically going to be talking about how to write a basic face wash recipe. In my last video, I explained how to write a formulation for making cosmetics, and I highly recommend going over and watching that video first before you watch this video, because this video might be a bit confusing if you don't watch that one, and yeah, this video will just make a lot more sense. I will put a link down in my description box to my entire playlist to this series, so you can just binge watch it all and be caught up with where we are now. But if you're caught up, then let's get started. So first, I think we need to discuss what the function of a face wash is and what makes a face wash. So a face wash is something that cleanses the skin, removes dirt and oil and pollution from the skin to, you know, cleanse the skin. The type of face wash we're specifically going to be talking about is liquid-based face washes that lather up. Today, there's so many different kinds of face washes. We have oil cleansers, we have cleansing grains, we have cleansing sticks. Some people just like to use basic soap, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to be talking about traditional face washes that are liquids that lather up to cleanse the skin. So a face wash primarily needs these four main ingredients. The first main ingredient is water. Now, this can be as basic as distilled water, or you can be as fancy as like rose water, aloe vera liquid, lavender water. Any of those types of water works out great. I personally always recommend using some kind of distilled water because pure water is important to your skin just as it's important internally. It's so important to drink water, so it's also important to bring water to your skin. Some people say that water is just a filler in cosmetics to bring down the cost value, which yes, this may be true, but it's also essential to the skin and it's used because water is like what creates life and water is just really important. So I always recommend adding in some kind of just pure distilled water, and if you want to add rose water, aloe vera liquid, that's great too. But for this recipe, we're keeping it super basic and we're just going to be using distilled water. The next main ingredient to add in a face wash is some kind of surfactant. So a couple videos ago, I talked all about surfactants. If you didn't watch that video, I highly recommend watching it because there's so much to know about surfactants and it's a bit confusing, so go watch that video if you don't know how surfactants work. But the types of surfactants you want in a face wash is specifically the surfactants that lather and cleanse the skin. Most of the time in a face wash, you use two types of surfactant. You always want to use an anionic surfactant, and then you want to use either a non-ionic surfactant or amphoteric surfactant as your co-surfactants. So in this video, I'm going to be using a anionic surfactant and a non-ionic surfactant, just because those are my two favorite surfactants to work with. But again, if you didn't watch my video on surfactants, go watch it. I'll link it down below. I highly recommend watching it. Now, the next important ingredient to have in a face wash is some kind of emollient or humectant. Emollients and humectants add moisture to the skin. I also have a video all about humectants and emollients and occlusives. These are all ingredients that add moisture to the skin. So if you haven't watched that video, again, go watch that video. I'll link it down below. There's a lot of videos that I recommend watching first before you watch this video so you understand everything the best you possibly can. So then lastly, another very important ingredient to have in your face wash is a broad spectrum preservative. Face washes are water-based products, and water is just a breeding ground for bacteria, yeast, and mold. So you want to make sure you keep your face wash safe by using a preservative. Make sure it's broad spectrum. Now, let's talk about a couple more things before we actually go to write the formula. As we all know that we learned in my last video, a formulation is written in percents and then later transferred to a weighed out recipe. You want to make sure your entire recipe is written in percents, and you want to make sure the entire recipe adds up to 100%. This is super important. A recipe is also broken up into separate parts. So a face wash recipe is typically broken up into three different parts: a water phase, an oil phase, and a cool down phase. If you're not using any oils in your face wash, you won't have an oil phase. I talked a lot more about this in my last video, so again, go watch it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Now, hold on, this might get a little confusing, but let me say this too. Some people like to make different types of phases, like the thickening phase or the surfactant phase. I'm just gonna leave like those phases out because I feel like it just makes it more confusing. We're just gonna keep it basic: water, oil, cool down phase. So let's start writing the recipe. So I personally like to start with my cool down phase. I don't know why. Anytime I write a formula, I just start with my cool down phase. Also, anytime I go to write a formulation, I already have a good idea of what types of ingredients I want, what the product is going to achieve, what skin type it's for, and just I have a good idea of what I'm trying to create. But for the sake of this video, we're just creating a super basic face wash that most people can make who are beginners, and I'm trying to make the ingredients super easy to get your hands on and not any type of luxurious expensive ingredients. So that's why it's super simple recipe. So for my cool down phase, we're going to be starting with my preservative, and my preservative of choice is Luicidal SF Complete. I absolutely love it, and you can use whatever preservative you want. Just make sure it's broad spectrum and it's water soluble. Just make sure it's compatible with all the other ingredients. If you don't know anything about preservatives, I do have a video all about preservatives. Go watch it. I'll link it down below so you can understand which preservative to use. But I'm using Luicidal SF Complete, and I always recommend to use your preservative at the highest suggested usage rate. And for Luicidal SF Complete, that's 4%. So we're going to be using 4% of the Luicidal SF Completes. So next is my thickener. Now this is kind of optional. If you don't want to thicken up your face wash, you absolutely don't have to, but I personally like to thicken up my face wash, and I prefer xanthan gum. You can use whatever thickener you want, but I typically use xanthan gum anywhere between 0.5 to 1%. I personally prefer it at 0.5%. I feel like 1% can be a little too thick. Use it at whatever percentage you want, but I'm just going to be jotting down 0.5 to 1%. So that's for the cool down phase. Next, let's go up to the oil phase. So again, like I said, we're keeping this formulation really basic, and I'm just going to be using 10% olive oil. Olive oil is easy to get your hands on. You can buy it at the store if you want, purchase it online, whatever you want. And I'm just going to be using 10% olive oil. You can use whatever carrier oil you want. Now, for the next ingredient in the oil phase, I'm going to be using 2% soy lecithin. So soy lecithin does two things. It works as a co-emulsifier in oil and water emulsions, which face wash is an oil and water emulsion. So the soy lecithin serves as a co-emulsifier, and it also serves as an emollient to add hydration to your skin. I personally really like soy lecithin. This recipe might even work without the soy lecithin because your surfactant will serve as an emulsifier as well. I've never tried it that way, but you can try it if you want. If it doesn't end up working, just shake up the face wash before you use it. Or you could use polysorbate 80 instead of soy lecithin, but you might have to use that at a different percentage. I've never worked with polysorbate 80 before, so I'm not sure what the suggested usage rates are, so make sure you do your research on that before you use it. But you can use whatever emulsifier you want or another emollient if you want. Like I said, you don't even need soy lecithin. It'll still probably work without the soy lecithin because one of the surfactants we're going to be using serves as an emulsifier. Alright, sorry if that was confusing. Let's move on over to the water phase. Now, for the water phase, I always use vegetable glycerin. If you've ever watched any of my videos, I basically use it in every single recipe. I just really like it. It serves as a humectant, it draws moisture to the skin, and I'm going to be using it at 5%. This is where it might get a little confusing, so we're going to be going back down to the cool down phase. And this is what you could call the surfactant phase if you want, but I'm just going to keep it as the cool down phase. I don't want too many phases because it kind of gets confusing. So the surfactant phase, we're going to be putting into the cool down phase. So you want to add in your surfactants after you add in your xanthan gum and mix up your face wash. Because what you're going to do is heat up your water and oil phase and then pour your water phase into your oil phase, and then you immediately want to add in some xanthan gum, mix it up with immersion blender, and then let it cool, and then add in your surfactants, mix it up, then balance your pH, and then add in your preservative. This will make a lot more sense in my next video when we actually go to make the face wash. Like I said, we're going to be using two surfactants. The first surfactant we're going to be using is our co-surfactant. I'm using 10% cocoa glucoside. This is a co-surfactant because it is a non-ionic surfactant. It doesn't produce as much lather as our main surfactant, but it's very gentle on the skin, and it also serves as an emulsifier to help blend that olive oil up in the rest of the formulation. So the anionic surfactant we're going to be using, which is our main surfactant, is Gentle Foam, and we're going to be using 5% Gentle Foam. Gentle Foam is still a very gentle anionic surfactant, because if you watch my video all about surfactants, you'll probably remember me mentioning that anionic surfactants are typically more harsh on the skin, and that's why they're used at like a smaller percentage, but you still want to use them because they're great latherers and cleansers. But Gentle Foam is actually very gentle on the skin, hence the name Gentle Foam, and I just really like that surfactant, and I love pairing it with cocoa glucoside. So these are the two surfactants I am going to be using, and And like I said, you want to add them after you thicken up your formulation, but you want to add them before you add in your preservative, and you want to make sure you balance your pH before you add your preservative. Because if you watched my video all about preservatives, you'll know that preservatives are very pH sensitive, and these surfactants are actually pH sensitive as well, and I believe most surfactants are. So you want to make sure your face wash is balanced to around 5.5 pH level. That's also the same pH as our skin, so that serves another purpose. I do have a video all about balancing out pH levels, so if you need to know how to do that, go watch that video. I'll link it down below. Now I know this is a little confusing, but it'll all make way more sense when we go to make the face wash in my next video. So now that all that is done, let's jump back up to our water phase. So what I do here is I add up all the percentages, and then I take that number and I subtract it from 100. And this number is the percentage of distilled water we're going to be using. You could use some rose water or aloe vera liquid if you want, or any other kind of liquid, but we're keeping this basic and we're just going to be using distilled water for the rest of the formulation. Keeping it simple for you guys. So we just wrote a basic face wash formulation. I'm really sorry if it was confusing, and I'm sorry that I mentioned a million other videos in this video, but seriously, if any of this sounded confusing, go watch any of the videos I mentioned in this video, or just wait until my video comes out on how to physically make this face wash, or just rewatch the video again. Or I got another option for you guys. I do have a Patreon where I post blogs that go right along with my videos. So I have a blog post on my Patreon that follows exactly what I talked about in this video. And reading the actual blog itself might be a little bit more understandable than this video, because sometimes it's just easier to have something written in front of you to understand it, and then other people like to have it explained to them in video form. Or, sometimes it's great to have a combination of two. So if this was a little confusing, go check out my Patreon. My blog is only $5 a month, and you'll also have early access to videos, and I actually have a lot of videos right now that only my patrons can see. So you'll get a perk from that as well. One more thing, as I mentioned in every single one of my videos, is I do sell homemade skincare products over on Etsy. I will link my Etsy shop down in the description box, and I'll link it up here so it's easy for you guys to find. So I hope you guys have a great week, and hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye!
I'm stuck in the motions. I've been consumed by the wrath of time like I'm frozen. I'm shattered in this life. It's still the path that I've chosen. Because I've had a vision, now I'm on a mission to find myself.